The story of Euphoria is there is little story, but enormous emotion. Wait, so no story? Well, the editors of Euphoria can explain.
There's a number of priorities that we have when we approach any scene. The ground that we plant is the fertile ground of character. We will often prioritize a character's experience over direct plotting.
And that's why this show feels different, because it feels. We wanted to learn how as editors we can prioritize and express emotion instead of feeling obligated to plot.
And so we had a conversation with the editors of Euphoria to discover how to do that. Because of this podcast, I got to interview one of my literal dream guests, Simon Smith, who edited Andor. But the plot twist is, as we finished the interview, my SD card failed. However, there was a cloud recording and the footage was saved because of Riverside.
All the remote interviews we've had have been recorded with Riverside. Ryan Trahan, Euphoria, and even the team at Pixar have all been in our Riverside studio.
But the best thing is that Riverside recordings are significantly better video and audio quality than anything we've ever used.
But the magic is that the interview is actually recorded locally. So if the internet bugs out, if anything happens,
we still have the recording. Riverside is also great for us editors because they get each of our cameras and audio as separate recordings. There's no need for us to download and re-upload. Podcast operations made easy.
So go to the link in the description and use code EDITINGPODCAST for 20% off.
Don't touch me. Don't touch me. You want to hit me. Do it. Hit me. I know. Get the off of me. Don't you touch her.
Sam wrote this amazing journey and we put it all together, and then we had to, bring it down in a way that really brought out the emotion in the house.
Think again, baby. It's okay. The hospital. If you try to put me in a hospital, I swear to God, we're gonna have a problem.
Rue, no, you're out of control.
Put the phone down.
And then she goes into the car, and then after she finds out that she's not actually going to the hospital, she's going to rehab.
Let's just get you back into rehab. Wait, what the are you talking about, Mom? I thought you said we were going to the ER.
What was happening in the car, we didn't want it to feel repetitive with what we had already seen in the house. And we wanted to make sure that we captured this feeling of like she's trapped in there. And Sam gave us, his direction when we were working on this episode. He was like, all that matters is the emotion. I came up with this idea, when I first was watching through the dailies, I was like, oh, it's interesting because some of the cameras are inside the car and some of the cameras were outside of the car. And I thought, well, maybe that would be an interesting way, to capture the emotion visually of what's going on in the car without having to hear all the particular dialogue. When they're in the car, you hear their dialogue.
I relapsed as soon as I got out of rehab.
And then when the cameras jump outside, you just hear the rush of the wind and the car noise. And I think it really helped to capture the emotion and that create that escalation where she's about to burst out, because it feels like she's like trapped.
I thought you said we were going to the ER. Yeah, baby, it's the same thing. No, it's not the fucking same thing.
And then it also allowed us to, visually feel what they were going through without having to hear, the details, which may have been, similar to what we had heard in the house.
We watch it and then we slowly I get a little more comfortable in like taking some creative leaps before we get things to Sam. And then the moment that Sam gives us direction or like an idea or a seed to go with, then boom, it's sort of giving us license to go nuts. I think we adhere to the script a little bit more. And he's like, don't worry about throwing it away. And then when he says the words, like, it's okay to be more experimental, we're like, oh, okay, here we go. You tell the editor to experiment, and we're going to go absolutely bananas bonkers. Aaron evolved the scene into a place that was more angular. We were trying to lean into a sense of poetic resonance, emotional sort of effusion, atmosphere and feeling. And you were essentially actually perhaps drawn into a deeper subjectivity with Rue because of how aggressively stylistic it was.
Mom, I can't do this. I can't do this. You guys need to let me out of this car.
I don't care.
I don't want to fucking do this.
It's suffocating. It feels like the air is being sucked out because of the circumstances of the narrative. I feel like I can't breathe every time I watch that scene.
That's what we like to do. We like to suck the air out of the room and make you struggle for your every breath. That's every day we're like, let's suffocate him with this episode. I mean, I jest because obviously the terminology you're using doesn't necessarily sound like a pleasant experience for an audience, but what is it that we're not searching for if it isn't like a visceral attachment to a character where you're so invested in their journey that their misfortune and their trials and tribulations are rattling through our own bones and exploding in our little brains. It's the deep subjectivity and the fact that we as editors can help sort of suffuse a different consciousness onto a viewer, that they can engage with an entire different emotional, mental complex by the aesthetic experience.
One other instance about that scene that I also really, really appreciated was also the choice of whose perspective it is through that scene. By definitely cutting to the sister a lot for the majority of that really made me feel like it's through her perspective, and it kind of added an interesting degree of separation where we do get to see Rue's behavior a lot more objectively.
I feel like I remember, Julio and I talking about this element of the family and how important their kind of reactions are. Obviously, we want to capture Rue's point of view, but their reactions as part of her family. And this is kind of the whole theme of this episode, as it's her friends and her family and her relationships, because we see the effect on Jules and Elliot and their relationship. And then also with her friends later on in the episode. It's so much about the relationships. On a personal level, my parents growing up both struggled with addiction. And so I relate a lot to Gia being a kid in that situation and having a family member who is struggling. And there's this real push and pull between anger you have at this person for kind of messing up everybody's lives, but then the love of a sister. We love these people and we want them to get better. And one of the principles, of kind of principles of Euphoria we kind of like to talk about is the it's about the emotion, but a lot of times it's about the reaction. It's about the other person. That's such a huge part of the story. Each one of these characters has their own point of view, their own perspective, their own journey, and we can be a part of that and we can feel these different emotions, the feelings of a mother watching this happen, the feelings of a sister watching this happen, the feelings of a partner watching this happen. There's all these different emotions. We look at every single cut, every single cut must be motivated. There has to be a reason to cut, and sometimes we hold in the earlier scene in the house where we just hold on Rue and we just hold and hold and hold. And you're just seeing all these different things passing through and emotions and thoughts passing through your head. And it's like, we want to see the reaction. We want to see Gia in the car, and Gia's going through all these emotions of like, what do I do? Feeling powerless and feeling helpless and feeling love and feeling anger and feeling all of these things. That's how you tell the whole story.
205 as an episode is such an incredible just culmination of the art of filmmaking to create an emotion. And I just love hearing you guys talking about editing emotionally first. That concept transfers so well to the other episode we would like to talk about, which is 207.
I feel like I've lived most of my life in my imagination, taking the smallest moments and dreaming them up into something bigger. But I always had this feeling that at any moment, something horrible was about to happen.
That enters and exits reality where you don't really know like what's a real scene or what's taking place on a stage or taking place in the audience, but emotion is such the forefront there. So how was the process of editing that? It seems like such a huge episode to wrap your brain around editorially.
207 is really tricky because it's a different lead character. It's really Lexi's episode as opposed to Rue. We spend so much time with Rue and she narrates for us, so she literally tells the audience what she thinks.
And every time you breathe out all the oxygen you have.
And then 207, we have Lexi telling us what she thinks.
I sometimes think about how my sister and I had so many of the same wishes growing up and how different we became.
Even the Euphoria audiences have seen a lot of these moments themselves and formed their own opinions. And now we're playing them through Lexi's point of view. What did Lexi see? How did it make Lexi feel? And it's what these guys are talking about as well. Like it all comes from our character and what are their emotions. So I think the main thing that we tried to do with 207 is dial into Lexi and like, what is Lexi feeling as she's putting on this play?
What if they think my intentions aren't good, when in reality they are good.
This is her big tour de force moment. And so how can we communicate those stakes? How can we get into her head? How can we tap into her nerves, her motivation, and balance the tone of it, because it's very vulnerable at times, getting up on stage under the spotlight and confessing how she felt about Rue.
And before I started doubting myself, every time someone would ask me if Jade was my best
But
friend.
at the same time, it's absolutely absurd with the kids running out with our life letters and sticking her head through it.
But our life!
We were constantly writing that line of humor and emotion and vulnerability and absurdism and dreams and reality. And it was just this enormous puzzle that honestly took all of us to put together. So I was very happy to have such a supportive team around to bounce ideas off of. And, there's a lot going on in that episode, and we had to divide and conquer quite a bit, where we start off with Lexi's play, but then at the same time we have Custer and Faye and Fezco, and, we all know what's going to happen with that, but we have to tee up the stakes of, is Fezco going to make it to this play, and how do we keep track of the time, because they're sort of happening in parallel timelines. It's actually not a very linear episode at all. So there's a lot of experimentation in building it.
Something else I want to highlight in 207 is that was particularly phenomenal on Laura's part was this one music cue that she landed on that unlocked the entire sonic palette of the episode.
I'm going to butcher it, but Vive pour vivre by Francis Lay, Live for Life. It's this just French New Wave cue, and I put it in my first cut, and I had a couple alts in my sequence.
I feel like I've lived most of my life in my imagination.
I put it in just because it felt like it supported Lexi, and it felt perfect for Lexi and different enough from the show that I think it helped make 207 really feel separate, but still, because we do so many different things with music and we try to do the unexpected, it does work within the series as a whole, but that one cue just had such sort of a tenderness and a dreaminess and a wistful quality. And that felt so right for Lexi in that moment, because the play is starting to go well. She's full of hope. She's thinking back on her life. And it really, I think the cue just really endears you to Lexi. I played it for Julio, and I think you watched a long sequence. And at the end, I was like, what do you think of this music cue? Too much? I have alts. And you're like, no, I love it. Let's do the whole episode that way.
I flipped out.
Yeah.
I was like, this episode, I think we got to lean into these French and some Italian composers. And I took it back to Sam, and I asked him, hey, LZ had this cue, so I'm thinking, what if, more of the, and Sam's like, I love it. Being cautious, getting license from the director, showrunner. And then, once we cut LZ loose on that, she just scored it. It was just so impeccable and beautiful and wistful and delicate quality that I think sort of captured, let's say, a facet of the way that Lexi might view herself. The music that might play for her as she's walking onto a stage.
And then you ran with it so much, then the overture came about. That's why there's an overture at the top of that episode.
That's right. We're like, let's push this to the edges of pretense.
It was nice because it set the tone and said, hey, we're doing something different here. This episode is not going to start the way you think it's going to start. I think it kind of put the audience on their toes, but also we were a little more in control of what they were going to expect. We kind of set them up. We eased them in, I think.
Hello. Cheeky segue. There's a few products we would like to share with you. So take a look. Get funding for your content. That's it. That's what Creative Juice can offer.
Juice Funds have helped creators upgrade their gear, hire editors, or start the podcast they've always dreamed of.
Which was amazing for us because we really underestimated how expensive a podcast is.
It's a lot of beans.
But what's really exciting about Juice, though, is that you stay in total control of your content.
Which is awesome because it's only you that knows exactly what you need for your channel.
Juice just supports you with funding and resources. Think invoicing, expenses, income, and more. Let Juice automate the busy work of your business so you can do what you do best. Creating.
70% of Juice Funds creators used funding to build out their teams.
And so you could use those funds to, hire an editor. Wait, we're editors.
We're editors.
You could hire us.
Go to the link in the description and sign up for Juice today at getjuice.com/getfunding. We need to have a serious conversation. I need you to stop spending your entire day looking for music that actually isn't even that good.
But Track Club is actually full of bloody great music. Their entire library is banger after banger and mash.
We also know that audio is essential for creating an emotional world for your audience. This is why beyond having great music, Track Club has MixLab, which allows you to use stems to customize it to your situation.
For example, there's this documentary song that I really liked that sounded hopeful. But if I soloed the vocals, that sounded scary. Or I just used the mallets to create a build. And Track Club makes it super simple to avoid copyright strikes. Paste your channel's URL into Track Club and Bob's your uncle, your videos will be cleared automatically.
My uncle's name's Dave. Guess what? They're offering your first month for free.
So go to the link in the description and get your free month of Track Club today.
What would seem to be an invisible edit that probably had days, weeks, or months to try to get that one cut to work?
I've got one that we ended up cutting out that's not in the episode, and that's after they draw the mustache on Lexi. You remember that? And then they shot this stuff of Rue and Lexi coming home after they draw the mustache on Lexi's face, and they're dancing. They're in the street. They're making shadow puppets, and it's this really sweet moment because Rue and Lexi grew up as best friends, their childhood best friends, and we don't really see much of them enjoying themselves before Rue's addiction comes underway. And so it was this really sweet moment of them just like goofing around and being kids and having fun. And we cut it together, we put it in the episode, but it happened right before Lexi pours her heart out on stage. She says goodnight to Rue, they clap hands, and then, Jade, the double, walks off stage and Lexi's alone on stage, and she gives this really poignant monologue about like how insecure she is.
The people I could lose, and the 1,000,001 reasons why I'm not good enough.
We watched that section down a zillion times, and so many people were like, them dancing in the street is so fun, it's so beautiful. And Julio and I were just like, it ruins the moment. It takes away from the weight of what Lexi's about to say. And as much as we love it, it completely derails the episode. And so that's, in a way, it's kind of a micro that participates in the macro of this is Lexi's play. And if she's not able to communicate her true intentions through the play, the whole episode's not going to work. Just because there's so many moving parts in that episode, we had to get the structure right. And it was like Lexi's play was almost like the baseline or like the root of the tree that all the branches stemmed out from. So we had to build the beats of what is happening in Lexi's play, what is building from one thing to another, and then how does everything else intersect with that? We lost one of our darlings, and it was really fun. It was really sweet, and people were really fighting hard to keep it, but it just didn't work.
So Sam Levinson is absolutely brilliant as a writer, and then as evolving his writing as a director. You see him evolve take to take to take, and he gets in the editing room and is respectful of the process, loves what editors do, has an editorial sense, like even on set. But in this instance, Sam fell in love with that little dancing in the street stuff. It was precious. It was lovely. Elsie and I sat there and we watched it. And Sam looks over, and he has this expectant look, and I'm just like, oh, I'm dreading it. I'm gonna have to say it. I'm like, I'm sorry, dude, I don't feel it. It derails this odd little mystic flow that was running, this cohesive, invisible cohesion that was happening in 207 was disrupted by a beautiful moment, which is not what you think. Hey, just put a bunch of beautiful moments together, smash them together, and that's an episode. That's all you need. And it's odd to confront an entire, like something that's independently absolutely lovely, disrupted the rhythmic, mystic flow of what we needed from Lexi in episode 207. It was a great moment. And Sam, to his credit, he's like, all right, I guess let them have this one.
This is a beautiful Murder Your Darlings moment. I was like, hey, this is beautiful, but I think your key element in this, from what I'm learning, is like emotion is truly the most powerful, important aspect you needed to capture throughout the entirety of all of these episodes.
I thought that I was completely alone on this opinion in the room. And I look over to Laura, and then she nodded, and I was like, oh, thank God. Thank God Elsie is agrees with me on this. 2 editors and then 3 editors, and then 4 editors are better than 1.
Yeah, how many editors does it take to drown a darling? 4.
Minimum.
How do you know when to hold on a shot and when to cut? Like, what instinct do you have that
allows you to figure that out? Because you have unlimited options.
So when we talk about editing, I actually tend to say it's the cuts are the last part about editing, that the cuts aren't what editing is. People think an editor is a person that cuts, and that's not true in my personal experience. I tend to look at it as like a polyrhythmic synthesis, and you're basically trying to intermesh all these different rhythms, visual and auditory rhythms. And those rhythms can be verbal dialogue delivery. They can be the actual music and the beats in the music, or if it's beatless, the frequency of a drone. And then on top of that, I look at, and speaking of beats, I feel like visually the edits are almost like a beat, but the beat is not the rhythm necessarily. It's a little more complex than that. It's because there's like a head turn, there's a blink. As we look at it more holistically, and we have so many concerns about like the subjectivity, objectivity, intersubjectivity, the emotional resonance. Like we're looking at so many different things that we want to meld and interweave that it's almost the last thing we're thinking about.
You see everything from the macro scale. Yeah, you see it from the big scale. It's not about it's you look at everything as that's the cut. Not that one cut. This is the cut.
It has to be a whole. Yeah. Exactly. It has to be if it doesn't work as a whole, it doesn't work. If we're looking at creativity and editorial creativity as a train, I like to think of the engine as intuition, and then the caboose is intellect. So you allow the intellect to trail behind and perhaps, assess the moves you've made. But I think it's important to intuit things in a moment. So you're not actually forming words in your head. This is the place I will cut. I just cut there. And I think once you have your sentimental education, and then you also have the diet that you chose of different arts, and then a lot of experience doing this, like, you've done it for a while. So you start to understand certain points that you think might have greater affect. And you look at things maybe from a little further away, structurally and formally. And that's sort of the intellectual caboose part. But that's important that trails and then ends up, you let the intellect apply certain strictures to the intuitions that initiated your edits.
As we've worked on the show, we've sort of developed the language that as you're editing, it just sort of you embody, and every edit matters. Like, I know I've made some edits where Leo's like, "Why'd you cut here?" And I'm like, and he's like, "You shouldn't have cut there." You have a reason.
One thing that's really interesting to me as far as just the life of an editor is the emotional journey that you go through watching all this footage and creating the cut in the edit suite. How does your own past experiences and your own emotional state affected by creating this highly intense emotional show?
I mentioned earlier that my parents struggled with drug addiction, and my dad got sober and kind of saved us. But my mom was never able to, and it eventually killed her. And so I really relate to Rue, having lost a parent. And I think there's a scene in 205, and I think also maybe in 208.
I watched you die. And all I could think about was how none of it felt real.
When I was about to watch those dailies, I was like, look, I'm gonna revisit what it was like when my mom passed. I was with her when she passed, and I cried, and I just let those emotions wash over me. And then I watched the dailies. Zendaya is just so amazing. Anytime when almost all of her takes are usable, but every once in a while it's like, ooh, this take like hurts me a little.
That's not true.
The emotion is so honest and it's so real.
I do care.
We've all had loss. We've all had love. We've all had friendships. We've all had family situations. We've all had various, life experiences that I think we can tap into and to really feel what our characters are going through. And we love these characters in Euphoria so much. I think we just fall in love with them. And so we really want to give ourselves up to them, and really fall into these characters and fall into their lives and see through their eyes and feel, things through their eyes.
I feel like at least a few times a week, I'm crying in dailies. I remember that cutting the pilot when I first saw Gia's reaction to Rue and her mother getting into it like in a scary fashion. I just watching her expressions as the outsider, vulnerable, powerless, seeing two people she loves go at it. I broke down. I'm just like, and it was like take 3 and take 4 and take 5. And I cried every time. So yeah, I think we all shed some tears in the old dailies process.
Julio and I have been on it since the pilot, and like the characters do feel like family. Like I've sort of grown up with them for like a year or two. I'm like, oh, I'm part of this world. What's happening with my friends or relatives? And like when I'm trying to like cut a scene, I'm like trying to put myself in their shoes, and then that's when it gets really difficult because they're making decisions, and then your edits sort of are affected by what they're doing on screen and the story. So it can be really affecting and hard sometimes.
For me, I think what's so fun about Euphoria and sort of these coming of age shows in general are teenagers make really bad decisions, and we were all teenagers once. So I think we afford our characters a little bit of grace when they make bad decisions, because it's like, oh yeah, I remember when I did that. Like, especially like as a woman, some of the choices like Cassie makes, I'm like, oh no, girl, that man's so good for you. But like, I've done it. I don't know. So it's not all the tragic stuff. Sometimes it's the funny like stuff that makes you cringe, where you wish you didn't do it, but you're also like, I did it. Yeah. So we bring that too. We bring a level of understanding and hopefully root that in the characters, and we understand who they are. So when they do make the bad decisions, the audience is like, oh shit, I've been there too. It's all a balance. And I think, we're all clearly very introspective, thoughtful people, and probably overthink a lot of it too much. But I think it benefits the work.
We're not interested in necessarily the character being rational or likable in every moment, but they have to be sympathetic. Going back to the principles of Euphoria, crafting the emotional the through line of each character that with the integrity to the character and the decisions they're going to make, and making sure we find ways of having that emotional life be accessible to a viewer, and something not only accessible, but something that we can attach to as viewers. I mean, it's a huge priority of ours.
One of the things I found most interesting there is, like, I know you jokingly said it, the principles of Euphoria editing. Or what other principles or languages or tenets of the Euphoria editing would you say?
The ground that we want to plant in the most is the fertile ground of character. We will often prioritize a character's experience over direct plotting, although, we're very interested in the illusory nature of plot.
If you think this would be like the right thing to go to, or the normal thing to go to in a TV show, or the normal place, like, oh, we're having an emotional moment, we should have music here. It's like, no, let's break expectation. Let's be unexpected. Let's do things differently. Let's not do the stereotypes. Let's not do the cliches. Let's explore. Let's experiment. Let's come up with a different way of doing things. As a viewer, you're always kind of on the edge of like, where is this going to go next? And it's like, oh, so you always feel that element of pride. That feels like Euphoria to me.
Yeah, you guys are definitely rule breakers, 100%, which makes it so fun to watch.
Yeah, it's permission to experiment, keeps it unexpected. And when I watch these shows, I'm like, you're so right. I've only just realized that now. I'm anticipating what crazy thing are you going to throw at me next?
Right.
And that really, really engages me in the story.
I think we all think Euphoria is a comedy, which might be an unpopular opinion.
I had that same thought when I was watching too.
It's like Shakespeare. It's like a tragedy.
Yeah. Oh, good.
It's a tragedy, but it's hilarious.
Yeah, it's true.
It's finding the humor to balance the darkness or the more serious things. It's having the light within the dark. And I know for me, when I'm cutting, I'm my first audience, and I watch the dailies. I know what's in there, and like if I can find ways of making myself laugh, I'll keep it in. And if then that makes Julio laugh, if that makes Sam laugh, that feels like a victory to me. It's just keep finding those little moments of humor to sort of what Aaron's saying, like keep the audience on their toes. Like we're in a really heavy, dark scene where everyone's confronting Rue, and then like she says something or she gives a look.
Hey, Cass.
Yeah?
I have a quick question for you.
What?
How long have you been f***ing Nate Jacobs?
What are you talking about?
Just like keeping those little nuggets in and finding them and building towards them, I think also adds to the surprise and keeps it from getting too heavy.
Some of Rue's reactions in 207 were so funny to the play.
You're right.
That's like a great, like that's my favorite parts.
And I think that comes to another principle of Euphoria, principle 12.7. No, wait, 12.4. And that's subheading C, to try to give each episode its own personality. That comes from Sam and his writing as well. We want to revel in paradox and be arrogant enough to feel that we can give it not only a holistic feel, but at the same time, its parts have their own identities. So each episode has an identity, despite it still feeling like an episode of Euphoria.
Each episode does feel like it is its own movie in itself, but then part of it as the extended narrative. I always like the philosophy of like, sometimes you struggle to remember what you watch, but you'll always remember how you feel. And with each of these episodes having their own identity gives me a really great emotional reminder of how I felt during each of those episodes.
Yeah, it helps you remember them individually. And so so each of them having their own identity makes the entire show feel so much more memorable.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Is there anything that you would like to tell the next generation of editors?
Worry less about the gear and the tech and worry more about what's in your soul and what's in your mind, in your head. The greatest tool and equipment that any editor carries with them is right here between the ears.
I think there's something Julio's always actually said is always be a student, and so never give up on learning and keep being open to new ideas and things, so that you don't be closed off in that way. And I think it does affect your editing as much as it does also your life.
Yeah, you can learn so much from everything you watch, and you can learn so much from other editors too. I love watching, other editors work and then being able to talk to them about it and like, oh, why did you make this choice? And how did this come about? And I think the editor community is really open, and it's a kind of, the post community is really amazing. It's kind of a big family. And so I would say lean into that. Like most editors, you can send us messages online and, say hi and ask us questions and all of us, we do a lot of mentorship work, and we're always trying to, pass on, everything that we've learned over the years. And we're always trying to, we inspire each other in this community. And so I don't know, we're a big family, and, come be part of that family, be part of the community, get involved with, with other editors, with the editing community.
I think this job, it's very easy to have a lot of imposter syndrome and feel like you're not good enough, or you're not finding something, or someone else would know how to solve these problems. And I think one of the mantras for me that I repeat a lot is, stay in the process, just keep going, and you're going to keep finding it, because even if you don't know the end goal that you're working towards, sometimes it will reveal itself if you just keep doing it. So, don't give up and trust your instincts. Your life experience have brought you here, and you have taste and you have vision, and that's specific to you. And so you're going to cut something a different way than someone else, and that's a benefit, and that's always going to be true. So just keep following it, keep going.
Thank you so much, guys.